A Dictionary of Ukrainian Emotions.
Welcome once again to the Dictionary of Ukrainian Emotions podcast. I am your host, John Freedman. Let me begin with a few words about our project, which is presented by Ukrainska Pravda, Ukraine's most popular internet portal. In 9 separate podcasts, we are offering readings and discussions of 9 works by 9 authors, all of whom are members of the Theater of Playwrights in Kyiv. Furthermore, they all contributed texts to an English-language anthology titled A Dictionary of Emotions in a Time of War, 20 short works by Ukrainian playwrights. This award-winning collection was compiled and edited by yours truly and published in 2023 by the great Laertes Press in the United States. Every text in the book was written in 2022 in response to the full-scale Russian invasion of Ukraine. The text presented in today's podcast is a powerful monologue titled I Want to Go Home by Oksana Savchenko. Oksana is a prominent Ukrainian screenwriter, playwright, and journalist. As a screenwriter, she has worked in television and film. As a playwright, she has participated at the Stuckmarkt Theater Festival in Heidelberg, Germany, the International Telpa Daugavpils Festival in Latvia, and the Contemporary Play Week in Kyiv. She collaborated with the groundbreaking Theater of Displaced Persons, created by Georg Genot and Natalka Vorozhbit, to tell the story of Ukrainians under the Russian occupation in East Ukraine after 2014. She has participated in the London Royal Court Theatre program for Ukrainian playwrights, and her short play, Just Tell No One, was featured in an experimental production by the award-winning Arlequin Players of Boston and New York. Reading I Want to Go Home today is Kristin Milward. Kristin is a powerhouse of an actress from London. I first encountered her when she performed in my translations of 2 plays by Belarusian writer Andrei Kureichik. Over her career, she has performed alongside Alan Rickman and Kate Winslet in film and has performed at the Royal Shakespeare Theatre, the National Theatre, and all over London's fertile West End. In recent years, she has made a name for herself as a champion of new Ukrainian writing. Her starring turns in Neda Nezhdana's Pussycat in Memory of Darkness and Inna Goncharova's The Trumpeter have garnered the highest praise an actor can receive. Searing, Kristin Milward dominates, a force of nature, and astounding are just a few of the epithets needed to describe her work. That is all very much evident in Kristin's reading of Oksana Savchenko's I Want to Go Home. Please stay tuned after the reading to hear Kristin's and my discussion of her approach and response to Oksana's work.
A Dictionary of Ukrainian Emotions.
I Want to Go Home by Oksana Savchenko. It's very difficult for me to catch the rhythm. Very difficult to catch the rhythm. Hatred is the only thing that hardens me. When I look at a photo of the bombed maternity ward in Mariupol, hatred blossoms in my heart for the Russists. My colleague can't find her parents. They lived in Mariupol. I tell my colleague she should leave Kyiv and go abroad, but I get a clear answer. I will go nowhere without my parents. I will go nowhere without my parents. Either we will get out together or we will die together. Hatred is born in my heart when I read comments under the posts of fashionable Russist bloggers like, "What have we done?" Hatred and anger are purely physiological sensations. War and physiology go hand in hand, shoulder to shoulder, like Siamese twins. This cannot be explained, just as childbirth cannot be explained. Hatred makes it difficult to breathe. It's hard to breathe. Hatred makes you want to kill. You want to kill the one who kills you. When I fled my hometown, I took a knife. I took a knife to protect my child. My child is not afraid of air raid sirens. She is no longer afraid of air raid sirens. When we first fled to a bomb shelter, my daughter was frightened and said odd, scary things like, "I had plans for life. I don't want to die. I had plans." My child is 12 years old. We all had plans for life. Now the ground has been pulled out from under my feet. I have no plans. I stand strong only because I love those who remain at home. Since the war began, my eyesight has been shot. I never wore glasses. At school, I teased all the four eyes. Now I've received my comeuppance. I can't see letters without glasses, although vision does return when your child is in danger, when your child is in mortal danger. You can read even the tiniest letters in a screenshot if the text concerns your child's safety, and you grow strong, standing on the step of a train, pulling your child from a crowd of mad people shouting, "Please, please," at the conductress. You pull your child out of the crowd by her arm. Your child's wearing a funny hat with a pom-pom on top, very touching. And you are very strong at this moment, pulling your child, who is on the step of the train, by her arm. As a teenager, I dreamed of my school lifting off into the sky. This was school number 153, named after Pushkin in Kyiv. Now bombs are falling there. You must be careful what you wish for. You never know when your wish will come true. My school named after Pushkin, which no one ever thought of renaming until the Russian whores began bombing Ukraine, until the Russian orcs began bombing Kyiv. I hope my school will be renamed. I will be the first to create a petition. I will make sure that no school in Ukraine ever again bears the name of a Russian poet or writer. The Okhmadyet Children's Hospital stands across the street from my school. The Okhmadyet Children's Hospital, where sick children are brought from all over Ukraine, sick children whose kidneys do not function, who need dialysis, sick children with cancer, children sick with poisoning and fractures are brought here too. There is no one there but children and doctors. I know because in peacetime I did a report on Okhmadyet. There are no strategic facilities there, nothing but my school, number 153, named after Pushkin. As a result of the first shelling, one child who was being treated at Okhmadyet died. I know that for a fact. I don't know how many are dead now. Since the war began, my eyesight has been shot. I can't see letters without glasses. My eyesight came back only once, when I was able to read an important message in a screenshot. It was a life and death message. Your vision sharpens when it comes to life and death. Hatred is a physiological property. I write in Russian, and I hate it. I write in Russian because I want this text to be read by Russians. I realized that hatred is a purely physiological feeling when I was at a cold train station and I watched a crowd of people get off the train with their dogs. The train spat people out onto the snow-covered platform as my child does chewing gum. Chewing gum. The chewing gum is bloody because my child's nose is bleeding. Blood flows. Although my child is calm, there is blood coming from her nose. This is how anxiety manifests itself, the anxiety that my little girl has been trying to contain all this time. The fact that the passengers arrived from Kyiv could be read on their faces. It's easy to read faces when everyone has one face. War puts a stamp on faces, a singular stamp. You can read us by the circles under our eyes. We all have circles under our eyes now. Circles under the eyes are a sign of war, the stamp of war. What's most difficult is seeing old people in wheelchairs being dragged along muddy tyre tracks. I forgot how to say that in Russian. Their relatives drag them over these ruts. They drag children too. On leashes they drag huge breeds of dogs with short tails. Naturally, some child carries a teddy bear. A bow-legged bear rumbles through the woods, and now a Russian bear stalks my land with its damned ugly paws. This bear has the frightened face of a conscript who has shat his pants out of fear. His name is Fodder. I do not feel sorry for conscripts. Shit on them. I do not feel sorry for Russian soldiers. Shit on them. I do not feel sorry for Russian women who will not be able to buy up IKEA. IKEA? They won't be able to buy it up. Burn in hell, bitches. I feel sorry for our Ukrainian children, our elderly, and our women who tried to escape the war but were killed by the Russian occupiers. The photos are on the internet, right there on the internet. This evidence of the crimes of Russian soldiers will resurface in The Hague. In the meantime, horses. There once lived a horse near Kyiv. She lived in a goods stable. She was 4 years old. For a horse, 4 is the age of a teenager. Translated into a human age, it's about 12 years or so, like my daughter. The horse's name was Fraley. A horse receives its name by way of its parents, part of the father's name and part of the mother's name. Thus one arrives at a horse's name, Fraley. A pinto, a Ukrainian horse breed. A beautiful horse that my daughter rode. My daughter. A small tragedy occurred near Kyiv, revealing the special cruelty of those Russian whores, those stinking, stupid orcs. They seized the stable where my child used to go. They brutalized the stableman on the 3rd or 4th day of the war, the beginning of the war. They made the stableman crawl face down, flat on the ground, crawl to a marked limit in 2 minutes' time, otherwise he would be shot, to crawl over earth dusted with snow, otherwise he would be shot. The stableman went into the stables to feed the horses, to feed horses who compete in competitions, show jumping and dressage, good horses that have never been offended by humans. Then there was Nick's dog, small and smiling. The whores took over the stables. The whores don't know what to feed horses, horses who had never experienced cruelty. One little pony named Coquette always smiled at me. The Russians captured the stables and starved the horses. Starved them. One man tried to reach the horses to feed them, but he was killed by the Russian beasts. Killed. Russian whores kill people. Does it make sense to talk about starving horses when Russian orcs are killing civilians in Ukraine? Does it make sense to talk about Fraley, who is 4 years old? That's about 12 human years. Does it make sense to talk about a horse when children are dying? Does it make sense to talk about a pony I always loved when children are dying? Does it make sense to talk about horses when people are dying, when children are dying, when children are dying of dehydration? We're not talking about Fraley. We don't know what's happened to her. We keep hoping. We know that one good little pony is dead. We know that 5 more horses are dead. No, we're not talking about Fraley. I have been speaking in Russian hitherto. Now I will not speak Russian anymore, only in Ukrainian. I call my mum and say, "Povritia air," in Ukrainian. I call my father and say, "Povritia air," in Ukrainian. I call Sasha and say, "Povritia air," in Ukrainian. I hear their tired, calm voices, and I'm ashamed to be here while they are there in Kyiv. In Ukrainian, my father says, "Daughter, you never let us sleep all your childhood. You never let us sleep. Now that you're an adult, shh, let us sleep. We're okay. We're okay." They're in a large apartment building with a few other elderly people. I can't breathe because of my hatred for the Russian whores. I can't breathe. War is when you can't breathe out of hatred. War is when your body is convulsed with pain out of fear for your relatives. It is when you escape abroad with your child and spend your time scrolling through the news, when you can't admire the sights of Europe's beautiful streets. Your heart is at home. You live at home. You learn what to do in the event there is a chemical attack on your family. You run to them. You cry. You can't cry. It was easier in Kyiv. It was easier on your own home ground. You're ashamed that you left. You live only by the news and chats with your friends. Your legs are weak. Your relatives from Kyiv are hanging on. You're sort of hanging on. And you don't cry. You're safe, damn it. Although after what happened, you know there are no safe places. Everything can change in one day. At first, you try to pressure your relatives. It's time to get you out of Kyiv. What are you thinking? You make recommendations because you yourself already left. But then Mother says in a low voice that she doesn't have a small suitcase. She doesn't have a small suitcase. And in her intonation, you feel the beating of her heart. She's afraid. She's glad you got out, you bitch, but she's there with Dad, 2 defenseless people remaining in a high-rise building with a handful of neighbors. And you decide to shut up. You decide to shut up. Because any pressure from those who abandoned those who remained is like beating a defenseless little child. It's like beating a child. I had a girlfriend. We went to Crimea together. My friend's name was Ira Dubrova. We went to Crimea back in the first decade of the century, when our biggest problem was finding the meaning of life and trousers that fitted our bum. My friend lived in Bucha, a small town near Kyiv. My friend was last online on March the 2nd. March the 2nd. She's been out of touch. Out of touch. Her mother has diabetes. There are problems with insulin in Kyiv. Bucha was blown to bits. I try to imagine my friend and her mother hiding in a basement as she rescues her cat. I try to find her. I send inquiries. No one knows anything. I look back over our text messages. I remember how we walked around Crimea in the early years of the 2000s, how we drank wine, how we got sick to our stomachs, how we listened to music. I remember when our biggest question was, why in hell are we alive? Not, how do we survive? I hope my girlfriend is alive. Maybe she just dropped her phone when she was boarding an evacuation bus. Just dropped her phone. Curfew in Kyiv. I call the man I love. We talk about the day, talk about how the day went. Softly, with my hand, I caress the screen where his cheek is. I want to kiss him, but I can't. There is distance between us. There is a war between us. And I want him so much. I so want to be with him. I want to go home. The 12th of March, 2022.
A Dictionary of Ukrainian Emotions.
Well, Kristin Milward, hello. Listen, you have been doing extraordinary work with the Ukrainian drama and theater over the last couple of years. And first of all, I want you to talk just a little bit, at least, please, about performing Neda Nezdana's play last year and Inna Goncharova's play this year at the Finborough Theatre in London, and also touring to Germany and Kyiv. What's that been like for you, Kristin?
I was lucky enough to get in contact with you over Andrei's play Insulted Belarus. And then from then on, when the Russian invasion happened, you contacted all the people that you had some connection with, which included me. And I then got in touch with Neil Macpherson of the Finborough, because I thought that he would be exactly the kind of man who would want to put on something. You had talked about putting on readings or performances of Ukrainian plays. And so Neil, as I was really sure, jumped at it. And then he asked me if I would do Pussycat. And I thought originally it was a bit too long. And I was also concerned, thinking people aren't going to know what the Maidan is. They're not going to know where the Donbass is. And of course, all that changed incredibly quickly. By the time the play went on in August 2022, people knew exactly where those places were. And I was very, very affected anyway by the audiences who came. But one girl stood out in my memory, and she was Ukrainian. She was from the Donbass. And she started quoting the play to me in English, the most lyrical passage of the play. And I then thought, what can I do? I can send money, I can do what I can, but actually the most personal thing I can do is to go. And so that was then set up through Neil and Alex Borovensky in Kyiv. And eventually I went in December 2022. And it was an extraordinary place to be. And I felt it was a huge privilege to be there.
Right.
Then we took it to Germany, to Atlanta, Georgia, and then this year to Lisbon. And on the strength of the performances in Germany last year, they established there, Larissa Itina, her husband, Misha, Stephen Bailey, they established a brand new festival for Ukraine, featuring Ukrainian events, painters, musicians, and then, of course, Neda's play, Close Sky, with these extraordinary students who didn't speak English, who had learnt it phonetically, came all the way from Kyiv and performed at the amazing theatre in Wiesbaden.
Uh-huh.
That's been the story of and then the show that we took to Germany this year was The Trumpeter by Inna Goncharova. And I hadn't really known. We didn't perform it in front of anybody here in London before we left, and I actually thought, oh God, I'm terrible. What are they going to think of it? And then it turned out, to be sort of a triumph. And I realized I'd completely misunderstood, in a way, the play. I'd certainly misunderstood the effect that it would have on audiences.
I think that's a common thing for an actor. I think actors are often confused and mistaken by what they think they're doing. And it takes the audience and other people to come and see it and let the actor know what's going on. Now, it's not a rule necessarily, but I heard that before. My wife is an actress, and I've heard that before. Listen, this brings me back to kind of the beginning. You brought up at the beginning how we came together. And the piece that you have read for us, for our podcast, is called I Want to Go Home by Oksana Savchenko. And it was written right at the beginning. And I'll take just a brief minute or two to tell about the fact that this text didn't exist until Philip Arnault and Center for International Theater Development in Baltimore commissioned a bunch of new plays, texts, from the Theater of Playwrights in Kyiv. Maxim Kurichkin, who was then the head of the theater, artistic director, was going to open the theater on March 12. He was planning to open a brand new theater. And the invasion, of course, took place the 24th of February. And he was going to open with a whole set of texts. And I asked him, I said, I need texts, because I had Kristin Milward in London waiting for texts. I had other people waiting for texts. I said, Max, send me those texts. I need them. And he goes, no, I won't send them to you. And I said, Max, I need those texts. And he said, no. He said, those are old. He said, that's a whole other world. Nobody needs those texts right now. He said, maybe 20 years from now, somebody will be interested in them. Not now. And I said, okay, so what do we do to get new texts? And he says, well, we need to commission them. People need money to survive right now. I went to my partner, Philip Arnault, at CITD, and literally either that day or the next day, he sent the money and texts started flowing in. And this was one of the first texts. The text that you read is one of the first texts that came in from that commissioning from my project and Philip's CITD. And it's fascinating because Oksana starts it with that thing. I want to catch the rhythm. I want to catch the rhythm. And you can feel that as a writer, Maxim has just called her or emailed and said, we need new text and we need them fast. So she's sitting down trying to convince herself as a writer. She's trying to convince herself at the beginning of the text to catch the rhythm. How can I catch the rhythm? How can I catch the rhythm? And of course that turns into a thematic thing. Catch the rhythm of this whole event, of course. but I can feel that moment when, oh my goodness, I need to sit down and write a text immediately. And this beautiful, powerful, angry, aching text that we get from her is incredible in its its visceral quality. And you have these marvelous moments of the horse, Fraley the horse, and where she asks that devastating question: does it make sense to talk about a pony when children are dying?
Yeah.
Because the Russians had come in and killed the horses as well as people. And the visceral quality of this you caught so beautifully in your reading. Did you have to work it that long? Did that just come right to you?
I think the fact is that the writing is so good that it's organic. Yeah, I read it a few times, but it goes like a great wave, I think, out of you. Once you get onto that wave, it carries you along, and it creates its own momentum and its own rage and its own... I mean, I agree with you. I thought that section about the horse, and yet it says absolutely everything. That is, that is it. It's that, I'll never forget that. And she's talking about Fraley. And then, how do you name a horse? And these horses have only been treated lovingly and with care. It's just, oh, God. No, it's astonishing.
And then she reaches the end of the piece, and she's talking about this idyllic time way back long before the war when she was with her friend. And our biggest question back then was, why are we alive? Not how do we survive?
That's right.
And once again, she captured the turn. She captured this outrageous, insane, mad, evil, criminal turn that took place in an entire nation's life on the 24th of February. It just comes right to the surface.
Yes, it does. It does.
Yeah. And I was trying to think of a way to describe it, and shock and fury is what came to my mind.
Yeah.
It's a tale of shock and fury. And I think it's able to communicate that to an audience, to, listeners.
I think so too. It should, and it does. I remember I said to you, that initially I'd read it and I thought, it's very easy for me to summon up rage. It's not a good characteristic, but it's true. But I thought, do I really want to do something that's so full of rage? And actually, I thought it's not just that. It is the cry of despair of humanity saying, what are we doing? So yes, in one way it's expressed through rage, but it's also, it's despair, I think. Her little girl whose nose is bleeding because she is constantly anxious. What has happened to that little pony? What is, the pointlessness of it, the cruelty, the pointlessness, the barbarity.
Yes. And for 2.5 years, I have been struggling for words. This is simply a fact of my life now. I was never a terribly glib person. But I was able to speak relatively well publicly, and I find that I hem and haw and stumble over words constantly now because the confusion in my head is so great, and the frustrations are so great. And it's one of the reasons why I truly love a work like this. Savchenko did an incredible job of taking the reason for my confusion and laying it out absolutely crystal clear. It's a genuine work of art that tells us about a transition point, a very, very serious transition point in history.
Yeah. No, I agree. And I think it's very powerful because it's relentless. It just, it starts as it means to carry on, and it just drives its way through. But it's also, I think what horrifies me all the time about, it was like the same when, when I watched 20 Days in Mariupol, you look at it and you see who the Russians are targeting. They're targeting very vulnerable women, for example, in when they bombed the hospital. It's the incredulity of it, actually, in this day and age. It's like she says when she went to Crimea with her friend, and as you say, they were thinking, does my bum look big in this? Or, and what is the meaning of life? Actually, nobody could have anticipated that 10, 12 years later, they would be running for their lives, their husbands would be fighting, and why? Why?
Yeah. That's a whole other big story that, alas, you and I don't have time to discuss, Kristin. I will simply say, however, because I want it to be recorded for posterity, that the quickest answer to your question is the why of it is because a man sitting in Moscow decided that there was no Ukrainian culture, no Ukrainian language, no Ukrainian nation. And he decided that land to the west of his land was his.
Yeah.
That is the short answer to your question. The long answer, we'll have to come back to together sometime and discuss the longer answer. But that's the short of it. Kristin, thank you so much. I'm very grateful that you found a few minutes to talk to me this evening, and I thank you so much for your great reading. Thank you so much, Kristin.
It's a real joy to see you, and I have nothing but the greatest admiration for everything you're doing. I'm not surprised your head is sort of constantly like that, because you live and breathe this all the time.
And thank you for the work you've done. Just incredible.
A Dictionary of Ukrainian Emotions.
Thank you for joining us for the second entry in the Dictionary of Ukrainian Emotions series of podcasts, in which we are offering 9 texts written by founding members of the Theater of Playwrights in Kyiv. All were written after the beginning of the full-scale invasion of Ukraine by Russia, and all are published in English in the anthology titled A Dictionary of Emotions in a Time of War, 20 short works by Ukrainian playwrights. As does Oksana Savchenko's I Want to Go Home, which you have just listened to, every one of these texts stands as proof of the power and resilience of the Ukrainian spirit, the riches of its culture, and the beauty of its language. Our next podcast will feature the American actor Wayne Moggins as he performs The Beat Upon Armored Personnel Carrier, an equally funny and compelling piece by Oksana Savchenko. Please join us for that. I am your host, John Freedman, and I look forward to connecting with you again soon.
A Dictionary of Ukrainian Emotions.